The garage fire that happened to Jay Leno in 2022 wasn't an accident. It served as a warning about how far he had fallen. After gasoline exploded in his hands, Thirty's face was covered in burns. However, that wasn't the worst aspect. His supporters would be shocked to learn the truths that his marriage to Mavis conceals. It's not just about their decision to never have children. In private, Jay's world is collapsing. The man who used to dominate late-night television is now engaged in invisible wars. And there is not much time left. On April 28, 1950, Jay Leno was born James Douglas Muir Leno in the sleepy town of New Rochelle, which is roughly 18 miles from Manhattan. Catherine, his mother, arrived from Scotland when he was 11 years old, never completed high school, but she worked hard every day and instilled a strong sense of responsibility in the home. His father, Angelo, was from the Italian village of Flumieri and worked as an insurance salesman. Every dime mattered, and their life was straightforward. However, Jay was raised by two parents who persevered through difficult times. New Rochelle was not elegant, but it was safe. And Jay learned the value of hard effort long before he comprehended comedy in his early years by helping out with chores and learning practical lessons. He was unconsciously strengthened by those early experiences. Jay enrolled in St. John's Preparatory School, a rigorous Catholic institution where rules seemed to keep everything together, after the family relocated to Andover, Massachusetts, when he turned 7. Almost immediately, Jay began to violate those norms, primarily because he couldn't help but make people laugh. He used to play practical jokes that made professors go nuts. He even nearly got expelled for setting off firecrackers in class. Jay would be a huge star if he studied half as much as he attempted to be humorous, according to what his 5th-grade teacher wrote on his report card. The irony was that she was unaware that she was making predictions about the future. He put in a lot of effort and continued to push himself despite all the difficulty he caused. He learned how to turn mischief into timing and timing into humor throughout these school years, which helped to shape his voice and courage. The serious one was Patrick, Jay's older brother. A fire during combat left him with terrible burns that followed him for the rest of his life, and he served in Vietnam during one of the most difficult periods of the conflict. He returned home, put in a lot of study time, and eventually became a lawyer despite the agony. Jay was a great admirer of him. When Patrick passed away in 2002 due to complications from those wounds, Jay's entire world was rocked by the tragedy. His brother had always struck him as steady and tough. Someone who persisted in moving forward despite the weight. Jay reflected more on time, family, and the fragility of things after losing him. It stuck with him and influenced the way he perceived the people in his life. Jay worked every job he could find in Andover when he was a teenager. He scraped up enough money at the age of 14 to purchase a 1934 Ford pickup, which he spent 2 years restoring. He worked as a McDonald's burger flipper and at a Ford dealership, where he loved the sound of the engine and traveled the long route on test drives. He saved nearly everything despite earning low income. He learned discipline and became frugal with money from those little jobs. He never went above his comfort zone and continued to follow the same routines even after he became well known. Once, after giving him a direct look, his guidance counselor advised him to quit school and continue working at McDonald's. For the rest of his life, Jay recalled that day. He wouldn't take it. In 1968, he applied to Emerson College, was accepted on a partial scholarship, and persevered through all the challenges. He completed his studies in speech therapy in 1973. His fascination in voices was stoked by his mother's fondness for accents and ancient Scottish tales, and he soon discovered that comedy appealed to him even more than academia. He had already experienced performing in high school. At one talent event, he was so good at impersonating professors that the entire room shook with laughter, but the school suspended him for going too far. At the time, he was unaware of it. But he learned a valuable lesson from that experience. Humor has the power to uplift or depress people. Time was of the essence. Sensitivity was important. Voice was important. All of that would help him in the future. He purchased a 1963 Chevrolet Impala with a powerful 427 cubic inch engine that drag racers adored when he was 16. He took pals on joy drives and fixed it himself in the garage. His lifelong infatuation began with the vehicle. At that age, cars gave him independence, and they shaped his identity for the rest of his life. He also benefited from his mother's Scottish heritage. She narrated stories with a calm tone and dry humor that occasionally included jokes. Jay didn't even intend to study her. Her timing, humor, and voice all influenced him and shaped his early comedic approach. She demonstrated to him that humor didn't always require loud noises. Sometimes all they needed was a little twist and honesty. By 1970, he was still a college student performing in Boston clubs for $20 or $25 a night, sometimes even at strip clubs to cover his tuition. He made jokes about dating, buses, teachers, and living in a dorm. Just ordinary occurrences that individuals were able to identify. By his senior year, he was organizing minor events on campus and presenting talent shows. His rhythm had returned. He had discovered his voice. He established the Emerson Comedy Workshop in 1973. More than 200 students attended the inaugural performance of the school's first comedy club. Everyone laughed at his comments about getting fries at Broken Drive because they were so realistic. The club quickly expanded and contributed to the development of the early Boston comedy scene, which eventually gave rise to well-known figures. Jay had begun something that would continue for decades, even though he was unaware of it at the time. He made $1.50 an hour driving a school bus so he could continue his education. He utilized jokes to quiet the restless and noisy children. He eventually came to the realization that he could make any audience laugh if he could make kids laugh at 7 in the morning. He learned rhythm, crowd control, and the value of adapting his material to the person in front of him from that employment. He researched comedic speech patterns for his thesis. He dissected the tempo and tones of Bob Hope and Don Rickles' songs. He practiced impersonation, particularly Richard Nixon, whose stiff delivery and uncomfortable pauses Jay nearly perfectly imitated. At events and parties, students pleaded with him to do it. His early routines were influenced by that impression, which also made him realize how much humor is found in the voice rather than the words. With just $300 and a van load of notebooks, he drove to Los Angeles in 1973 after graduation. Every mile felt burdensome due to the high cost of gas due to the oil crisis. He spent weeks sleeping in his vehicle and doing open mics for sometimes nothing more than food. He spent some nights sleeping in vacant homes left unoccupied by real estate brokers. He persevered despite the difficulty because each performance improved him. Everything changed when he made his Tonight Show debut in 1977. He got his first legitimate writing position on Good Times in Los Angeles, where he assisted Jimmy Walker in creating punchlines. He even contributed to the creation of the line that gained widespread recognition in America: "Den o meat." He learned from working behind the scenes how jokes have to be delivered simultaneously to millions of people. He learned structure and discipline from that employment. He energized audiences in front of celebrities like Tom Jones and Johnny Mathis at the Troubadour in West Hollywood. He joked about the peculiarities of the club, taunted the audience, and improvised. On certain occasions, he was remembered more than the main performers. It prepared him to manage any space, even the most difficult ones. He was doing around 300 shows a year at the Comedy Store by 1976. He rode his motorcycle right into the club and up to the stage to make a statement. People adored it. There was a lot of commotion, smoke, and hungry comedians there. Jay persisted, though. It was worth the long nights. His talent level increased with each performance. But money was scarce. He ate from vending machines, took YMCA showers, and lived out of his Lincoln Continental in the middle of the 1970s. However, he continued phoning clubs to request stage time, and if necessary, he gave free performances. He developed a strong sense of toughness as a result of that fight, and his subsequent successes felt well-deserved. In 1978, he starred in his first motion picture, American Hot Wax. He made $500, hardly enough to pay his bills. Although it didn't make him famous, it gave him hope that even little doors could open. On March 2, 1977, Jay Leno, at 26 years old, appeared on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. And it seemed like the time his entire life had been building up to. He simply had 5 minutes to establish his worth. The crowd immediately focused on him as he discussed everyday experiences and family eccentricities that everyone could relate to. The audience stood up after he was done speaking. Even Johnny Carson, who rarely gave newbies much credit, suggested he might be the next great thing and described his performance as accessible and clean. Every comedian aspired to enter the gate of The Tonight Show. And after Jay passed through it, things accelerated. Throughout the late 1970s, he returned repeatedly, and viewers at home began to recognize him. And he went from being a club comedian to becoming well-known nationwide after this debut. Shortly afterward, in 1977, he secured a reliable role on the Marilyn Maku and Billy Davis Jr. show. Jay starred in every one of the 6 episodes that summer, which was the first network series ever hosted by a black couple. Every week, he gave monologues that included jokes on current affairs and his appearance, particularly his jaw, which people were always remarking about. On Friday nights, families watched the show. And Jay took advantage of the opportunity to try new things and improve his timing. By the end of the summer, he was well known for his ability to connect with a wide range of audiences in addition to being a club comedian. He was prepared for anything that followed by that growth. Jay Leno taped his first HBO comedy special, Jay Leno and the American Dream, live at the Wilton Theater in Los Angeles in 1985, 8 years later. For a cable comedy event at the time, it had a huge viewership of 1.2 million. He made jokes about American consumerism, politics during the Reagan administration, and the odd things individuals do on a daily basis. Fans who had seen him rise from small venues to large stages crowded the wheel turn. What many were beginning to believe was confirmed by that special. Jay was a well-known comedian with a keen intellect, a humble voice, and a gift for fusing humor in real life. He got closer to his own late-night career and was able to get more huge gigs as a result of the special's popularity. He was touring the nation by 1986. A heckler tossed a beer bottle at the stage one evening at Chicago's Zanies. Rather than losing control, Jay transformed the heckler into the target of a 10-minute ad-lib roast that turned the entire room against him. His witty repartee saved the evening and became a tale that comedians still discuss. He became one of the most reliable performers in the nation because his shows consistently sold out and he exuded enthusiasm on stage. He quickly had numerous opportunities to fill in on The Tonight Show after these incidents helped him establish the kind of reputation that TV networks trusted. Jay became Johnny Carson's regular guest presenter when NBC hired him in 1987. He filled in around 50 times annually. This was a unique privilege for Carson, who hardly trusted anyone with that seat. For example, Jay started a segment called Jaywalking, in which he stopped people on the street and asked them basic questions like who invented the telephone, or who was president during World War II. The absurdly incorrect replies made this segment renowned. His participation on the show continued to increase until viewers thought he belonged there. Jay felt like the obvious choice to take over as host when Carson retired in 1992. But it wasn't easy to get the job. Jay and David Letterman were engaged in a heated argument when Carson announced his departure. Jay appeared in disguise as a reporter wearing glasses and a false nose for an NBC press conference regarding the change. Quietly, he made his way through the gathering, asking questions to gauge the atmosphere. He gained insight into the desires of CEOs and the opinions of the media. He was able to improve his pitch and advance in the hiring process thanks to this odd but astute maneuver. It was later referred to as one of The Tonight Show battle's most audacious moments. He took the stage as The Tonight Show's new official host on May 25, 1992. 16.1 million people watched the premiere, making it one of the largest late-night debuts ever. He began by making jokes about George H.W. Bush, who was having trouble winning re-election. The first visitor was Billy Crystal. Jay was able to confidently handle the show that evening. It also demonstrated the enormity of the crowd anticipating his performance as Carson's replacement. Things were chaotic behind the scenes. Helen Kushnick, the show's producer, imposed a rule prohibiting viewers from calling the program directly. She pushed agents and managers to place their stars on The Tonight Show before any other show, and she demanded complete control over all bookings. As a result, there were heated arguments with publicists and even the Arsenio Hall concert. The crew was miserable because of her outbursts and threats. 4 months after the show's premiere, NBC fired her when employees departed and agents voiced complaints. Everyone was uneasy about the environment she left behind, but Jay persisted in publicly defending her and claiming she was misinterpreted, which heightened the tension. Jay agreed to a $40 million, 5-year contract in 1993. Despite all the upheaval, it was evidence that NBC had faith in him. With Kushnick's dismissal, a difficult chapter came to an end, and Jay's extension demonstrated his commitment. The program received its first Primetime Emmy for Outstanding Variety Series 2 years later, in 1995. The victory stabilized the team and demonstrated that, despite all the difficulties behind the scenes, viewers continued to find Jay's humor and talent endearing. The years 1995 to 2000 were Jay's heyday. The fact that President Bill Clinton sat across from him on January 26, 1998, just days after the Monica Lewinsky affair broke, was one of his most memorable memories. Jay created an interview that attracted almost 20 million viewers by combining fun with thoughtful questions. It was one of the most popular late-night shows ever and demonstrated Jay's ability to remain humorous even when dealing with serious political issues. In 1996, he started a weekly feature called Headlines during this time. He displayed bizarre real-world newspaper clippings, with followers providing the funniest ones. Over 100,000 submissions were submitted annually by the show by 1997. A man suing his toilet for emotional anguish was one headline that people would never forget. The segment helped keep The Tonight Show entertaining and new as it grew so popular that other programs began to imitate it. Jay extended his deal once more in 1998, this time for an additional 5 years and $100 million. He became the highest-paid late-night host of his time as a result. Much of that money was spent on his passion for automobiles. By 2005, he had amassed over 180 cars in a massive garage in Burbank, including rare items like a 1906 Stanley steamer. He restored engines and polished details on many of the vehicles himself. He brought the automobiles on the show occasionally to tell their stories, and his collection became an integral part of who he was. Jay began doing remote broadcasts from locations like Camp Pendleton after the September 11 attacks in an effort to boost troops' spirits and demonstrate support. He gave relief money his fees from those episodes. These episodes become some of the most significant ones of his career because they combined poignant moments with lighthearted humor. He commemorated his 3,000th Tonight Show episode in 2004. The evening was packed with former guests, such as Arnold Schwarzenegger, who made his well-known announcement about running for governor on the show in 2003. Jay had now entertained over 2,500 people and achieved a level of late-night fame that not even Johnny Carson had attained. The achievement demonstrated his profound influence on American television and his progress since that first 5-minute performance in 1977, when he entered Carson's stage and transformed his life. When Howard Stern first appeared on The Tonight Show on November 30, 1995, his enthusiasm was enough to rock even the most serene space. Jay Leno did not anticipate what transpired, although he did anticipate jokes and even some mayhem. The bikini-clad models that Stern brought in, Nikki Tyler and Janine Linda, caused the audience to erupt in cheers. Then, beneath the studio lights, he instructed them to share a kiss. The clamor of the crowd increased. Leno made an effort to grin, but his eyes were constantly darting around as if he was waiting for someone to cut the power. Stern pushed things further and began sucking one of the model's toes on live television before he could advance the show. The crowd sent forth a yell. Leno froze. He attempted to go on to the following portion, but the cacophony persisted. He left the set during the commercial break because he was unable to hear his own thoughts. Stern boasted the following morning that he had gone beyond what anyone would consider acceptable, but NBC later removed the entire incident from the final broadcast. Lowe told him over the phone that it was outright debauchery. Everything changed in that one instant. Stern was never asked back, and NBC had to deal with irate viewers who questioned how it ever aired for months. There was still more anxiety surrounding Leno. Since 1992, when Johnny Carson resigned and NBC chose Leno over Letterman, the conflict between him and Letterman had been intensifying. There were rumors throughout the network that Leno's staff had disseminated rumors about Letterman's private life to cast doubt on him. It was described by some insiders as a campaign to disqualify Letterman. Helen Kushnick, Leno's manager, was charged with delivering the network executives these tales directly. After losing the position, Letterman left NBC to start The Late Show on CBS, where he would sit directly across from Leno every night. Letterman made on-air jokes about Leno throughout the 1990s, but they didn't sound humorous. It sounded angry and hurt. Both men continued to bring up the conflict in interviews years later. Letterman claimed that the entire media frenzy was embarrassing, but it was obvious that the decision still hurt. For decades, late-night television was influenced by that protracted battle. Conan O'Brien caused the most trouble. Leno assured Conan in 2004 that he would quit The Tonight Show in 2009. He grinned as he said it on air, giving the impression that it was the smoothest handoff in TV history. After the agreement was formalized by NBC, Conan spent the following 5 years getting ready for his ideal position. However, Leno was reluctant to leave in 2009. In an attempt to satisfy everyone, NBC created a new program for him at 10 o'clock p.m. Rather, his ratings plummeted. Conan's numbers also declined. Several affiliates expressed dissatisfaction over Leno's show's negative impact on their nightly news. In a panic, NBC informed Conan that they intended to reschedule him for 12:05 a.m. Conan declined. He claimed that The Tonight Show would be destroyed if it were moved to midnight. In January 2010, things went haywire. Leno's program was cancelled. Conan was pushed into a deal by NBC that he didn't want. Leno returned to The Tonight Show, and Conan left with a $45 million payout. Leno had betrayed him, according to critics. Because he destroyed Conan's dream, some even referred to him as a serial killer. For a while, the entire late-night world was tilted by the loud backlash. Leno's own crew was experiencing another storm behind all that commotion. He had gotten The Tonight Show thanks to his manager, Helen Kushnick, but she dominated his life with rage. Employees reported that she tossed a phone at Leno during practice, shouted every day, and banged phones. He thought he owed her his career, so he said nothing. His career was at its lowest point during those years. She was eventually dismissed by NBC because the network could no longer tolerate her behavior, not because Leno insisted on it. Later, Leno acknowledged that he remained silent because he was afraid of losing everything he had fought for. It demonstrated how much he had to go through to maintain his job and how much pressure there was behind the scenes. Leaked memos showed that when Leno returned to The Tonight Show in 2010 following Conan's departure, he had threatened to sue NBC if he did not restore the show to him. The fans were taken aback. This supported the notion held by many that he was more concerned with his career than his commitments. Conan took $45 million, but Lowe was the target of public outrage. They said that he stole Conan's guests, damaged Conan's ratings, and then returned the show as if nothing had occurred. Overnight, his image shifted. He was viewed as someone who prioritized ambition over loyalty by those who had previously viewed him as the reliable company man. The controversy left scars that are still discussed today and rocked late-night television. In 2009 and 2010, the conflict peaked. When Leno left The Tonight Show in May 2009, he had been its host for 17 years. On his first night, Conan took over and drew in almost 10 million people. 10 p.m. is Leno's new show. Garnered just 5.5 million in a matter of months. Sections that seemed strange and uneasy caused critics to shake their heads. Local stations expressed dissatisfaction about Leno's up to 25% decline in their evening news ratings. And even 50% in other cities. NBC had to take action by January 2010. Leno was pushed back to 11:35 p.m. After that, slide Conan until midnight. Conan departed, claiming it went against The Tonight Show's entire concept. NBC studios were surrounded by fans holding signs that read "Fire Jay." As though the conflict had shattered the backbone of late-night television, the network appeared lost and the ratings plummeted. The chaos eventually subsided years later. After his comeback, Leno remained until February 6, 2014. By the time he left, he had hosted 4,610 episodes. Everyone was present on his last night, including Oprah Winfrey and Billy Crystal. Billy Crystal led a heartfelt, humorous rendition of So Long Farewell that evoked sentimentality around the studio. As Gar Brooks performed Friends in Low Places in the dance, Leno observed with a weary but appreciative smile. Off camera, he described how, despite his hectic schedule, he loved spending the end of the day with his wife Mavis, so he drove home every night just to spend time with her. With an 8.2 out of 2, his goodbye program became one of the most watched farewells in the history of late-night television. With the burden of 20 years behind him, he thanked his employees, thanked the audience, and handed the torch to Jimmy Fallon. Leno began a new life with Jay Leno's Garage in 2015. His escape had always been cars, and now the world could see it firsthand. With 1.1 million viewers, the show debuted on October 7, 2015, marking the largest original series launch in CNBC's history. Supercars like the McLaren P1 and a 1914 Detroit electric automobile were all kept in his enormous garage in Burbank. The show combines celebrity guests trying out crazy machinery with in-depth automotive knowledge. In 2016, it received a Primetime Emmy for Best Short-Form Nonfiction. By 2022, the YouTube version boasted over 1.5 million followers and millions of views on videos featuring celebrities like Arnold Schwarzenegger and Bill Gates. People stayed because of Leno's easy humor and uncomplicated love of old metal and engines, even though they came for the cars. And then there was the fright that left everyone in awe. Leno was repairing a 1907 white steam car in his garage on November 12, 2022. He attempted to force air through a jammed gasoline line. His face was splattered with gasoline, which also struck the pilot light. In an instant, flames swept over him. After dragging him away, his friend Kevin Kaki put out the flames and dialed 911. Leno's face, hands, and chest were severely burned. There were third-degree burns on his face alone. He underwent skin grafts, surgeries, and hyperbaric oxygen treatments for 9 days at the Grossman Burn Center. He made a joke about getting a face full of gas and then lighting himself up despite the pain. Even if his fans were shaken, he returned to YouTube and television with the same serene face. It demonstrated the tenacity that underlies his laid-back attitude. Jay Leno initially met Mavis Nicholson at the Comedy Store in Los Angeles in January 1976, before all of these catastrophes. Leno's jokes appealed to her as a young feminist writer who was attracted to intelligent guys. As they conversed, they discovered that they had similar concerns, particularly combating the growing problem of domestic abuse in the middle of the 1970s. Humor and common ideals were the two things that brought them together. Long before celebrity altered their lives, they became lifelong friends and activists. On November 3, 1980, they tied the knot in a modest ceremony in their living room that reflected their appreciation of tiny things. Leno's parents' wedding anniversary fell on the same day. Mavis wanted to save money for a house, so there was no engagement ring. The cost of real estate in Los Angeles was rising, and purchasing a condo seemed more prudent than purchasing jewelry. Their marriage demonstrated their true selves as a couple that valued stability and cooperation over glitz. They also decided not to have children at all. After years of discussion, they concluded that their lives functioned better without children. In 2002, Mavis told Oprah that they liked being able to continue dating. Leno was able to get home by jumping on flights to finish shows. Their professions expanded. They remained close. Just 22% of affluent married couples in the U.S. decided to forego having children in the early 2000s, and the Lenos joined that rising percentage. Mavis's advocacy helped her forge her own strong identity. In the 1990s, she established the Women's Rights Fund and created documentaries that raised awareness of the hardships faced by textile workers, such as the Uprising of 34. Millions of people saw the movie, which was broadcast on PBS and other worldwide stations and received major award nominations. Jay gave her all of his support by allocating the proceeds from The Tonight Show to her endeavors. Collectively, they brought attention to problems that hardly ever made the news.